right?
Yeah.
Let's bring Greg Cosell in from
now.
NFL Films. Greg, what's up? How are you?
Doing great, guys. How are you?
Hi,
What up,
Cosell.
Doing well. We just had Chris Lowe on from ESPN. He broke the Nick Saban retirement story yesterday, and then he just happened to kind of throw DeMeco Ryans' name in as a possible candidate at Alabama. How good of a job did he do with that team? Obviously, I know from a statistics standpoint, 3-13-1 last year, and they win the division, host a playoff game this year. What did you see from him this year?
Well, I mean, I don't know what he does, on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, they got the quarterback right.
Yeah.
And when you get the quarterback right, and he played every game, I believe, but two, that goes a long way. When you draft a quarterback with the number 2 pick in the draft, in many ways, everything you do has to be geared toward making that guy a big-time player. And, don't forget, he came from the Niners. He understood that. He brought in Bobby Slowick, who was with the Niners. And by the way, Bobby Slowick was also on that Washington staff in 2013 with Kyle Shanahan, with Mike McDaniel, with Matt LaFleur. Sean McVay was on that staff. Kevin O'Connell may have been on that staff as well, if memory serves me correctly.
Wow.
So DeMeco Ryans
Yeah.
understood how important the quarterback is, because often defensive coaches come in with the attitude of the quarterback is just a piece of our team, and we're going to, and ultimately, look, I learned this from people smarter than I, that when you draft a quarterback high, that everything in the building must be geared to making him a great player, and that starts with the receptionist and the janitor and everybody else. That's the goal, because if CJ Stroud doesn't make it, then DeMeco Ryans, and he might be a great coach. None of us know that. We're not there, but he may be a great coach. But if the quarterback isn't any good, then you know what? In 3 years, they're going to say he's not a great coach.
True.
Speaking of Bobby Slowick, you mentioned him. Let's talk through, if you don't mind, some of these Titans candidates,
Sure.
which they haven't officially asked for permission to talk with him, but I would imagine that is coming. 36 years old. You mentioned the time with Mike Shanahan and getting to know Kyle Shanahan, and then all of that time with the 49ers. What do you think about Bobby Slowick and what he was able to do with that Texans offense?
Yeah, and that was a fun offense to watch, and I think so much of that probably comes from his background with being with Kyle Shanahan, just like Mike McDaniel, and now with the Miami Dolphins, and I think that those guys understand the importance of offense and the importance of scheme, and the importance of your quarterback executing the scheme at the highest level possible. A lot of people don't realize that the execution of scheme, where the quarterback actually drops back and delivers the football, maybe it doesn't look to the casual fan like that's a difficult thing to do, but it's very difficult to do. More people are accustomed to thinking that when the quarterback leaves the pocket and runs around, that, man, that is just special stuff. And it is. No argument about that. But, executing the offense play after play after play at a really high level is also really difficult to do. And so someone like Bobby Slowick understands that. I mean, in a sense, what I said about CJ Stroud with the Texans totally applies to the Titans. While Will Levis was not a top 5 pick, for all intents and purposes, he is for the Titans. So everything going forward must be geared, including the hiring of the head coach, and staff must be geared to making Will Levis the absolute best player he can be, whatever that turns out to be. I think we know he's not going to be a bust. We don't know what beyond that. We don't know, but everything must be geared toward making him the absolute best he can be.
That's an interesting point. So it's good to know that there is a floor that we think that there is, right?
That we think, yeah.
Well, I mean, look,
so you don't know what the ceiling
based
could
on
be.
tape study, based on conversations I've had with people who, some who coached him in college. So, I don't think you're going to be looking at a bust. Now, again, that doesn't mean he's going to be a top 3 quarterback in the league or a top 5 quarterback or a top 12. We don't know the answer to that. But I think it was pretty evident, particularly given the handicaps he was working with. I mean, he played behind one of the 2 or 3 worst O-lines in the league. And, he hung in there and played and really did not play poorly. I mean, you can't really say he had a bad game where you went, oh, God, you really couldn't say that. So, he's clearly mentally tough and he's got physical traits. So you'd have to assume that with an improvement in talent, which again, we have to wait and see about that, and with a coach who understands the importance of him and the position, that he's only going to improve, not get worse.
and has an arm to go with it, which you've
Yeah,
said
he's got
from the
physical
get-go.
traits, no
Yeah.
question.
So,
But
go ahead.
go ahead. No, I was going to say, so the focus has to be on making Will Levis the best he can be. Otherwise, guys, in 3 years, we're going to be having the same conversation.
So along those lines, a lot of Titans fans are wanting an offensive-minded head coach, right? And I don't know if that necessarily matters, but that is what
Right.
Titans fans are wanting. And along those lines, the name that has come up often is Ben Johnson,
Yeah.
OC, obviously for the Lions, and what he's done with Goff. Now they actually had an offensive line, right, to play behind. So, but what is your take on him as a candidate?
Well, I love watching their offense. I mean, again, none of us know what the transition from being a coordinator to a head coach is, because being a head coach, you have to deal with the entire team. And then there's the human element involved in that, more so than if you're a coordinator. There's always a human element in everything, but a head coach has to deal with everybody. But their offense is really fun to watch. He's got a phenomenal innate understanding of spacing with route concepts, which by NFL standards makes it relatively easier for the quarterback to see and define the throws. Obviously, they've got a very good O-line. They've got a classically great quarterback for that style of offense in Goff. And Goff's not a runaround guy, but he's 6'4" with a big arm, can make every throw, is tough physically, will stand and deliver. But he understands spacing. Spacing is a word you don't often hear in football, but I've said this many times over the last couple of years as I've learned more and more from people smarter than I. Anytime there's confined space, spacing is a really important concept. You hear about it far more in basketball because the court is smaller. You hear about it in hockey, like on power plays, spacing is critical. You guys know this. You have a hockey team in your town. But even football, it is confined space. It's just bigger confined space. So therefore, spacing of routes is so critical, and he's a master at that.
So along those lines, and this might be a weird question, but I'm just trying to let you explain it a little bit more when it comes to spacing. But when you watch what the Titans did offensively in spacing, is there an example? Do you know what I mean? Where you can say, okay, yeah.
Well, there's a lot of teams. The Titans, I don't think, quite fall into that category.
Right.
Because there's a lot of teams that believe, I think, and again, I don't know every coordinator, and I don't have conversations with every coordinator. And sometimes when you watch film, you just know how things are done because it's there on the tape. But a lot of teams believe in just creating one-on-ones for their receivers. Now, if you've got great receivers, that can work. And somewhere along the line, guys do have to win one-on-one, no matter how good your concepts are. We know that. But you don't want to live like that. You don't want to live that, hey, if it's every play's one-on-one, that's all we're trying to get done. So I feel like when I watch tape, I can see what the Lions do. I can see what the Rams do. I can see what the Niners do. I see what the Packers are now doing because they do such a great job with the use of motion as well. The top 6 teams that deploy movement at the snap of the ball more than any other teams in the league, the top 6, they're all in the playoffs. Because motion gives you so much in terms of what it does for you offensively and what it does in terms of shrinking the defensive menu. So, there's certain things you can see on tape and you go, yeah, that's really, really good. And then you watch other teams, and even if they're pretty good, sometimes you feel like, they're good because, hey, you know what? They got some pretty good talent, and it can work sometimes.
Fascinating. Yep.
Cosell, are you impressed by what Aaron Glenn was able to do up with Detroit, or is it? I'm twisted because I watched the Hard Knocks, and I don't know exactly what I'm seeing from Hard Knocks.
Yeah, Aaron Glenn's a fascinating guy. It's funny. A good friend of mine in coaching, when Aaron Glenn first got into coaching as a DB's coach, told Aaron Glenn he should reach out to me to talk. And I talked to Aaron Glenn, 8 or 9 years ago when he first got in. And he's a great guy. I love Aaron Glenn. I think that he's done, let's put it this way. I think he has learned so much over the last couple of years because he wanted to play a certain way, but he didn't quite have the talent to do that because he wanted to be super aggressive and play man coverage. Okay. Because he was with the Saints. He learned from Dennis Allen. He wanted to be super aggressive. He doesn't have the corners for that, and he still doesn't. So he learned that, hey, I can't play like that. So now he's much more selective, and when he pressures, his pressures are really good, by the way, and he's much more selective in when he plays man. So I think you're watching a young coach really develop in a beautiful way, and I think he'll only get better and better. Now, I wouldn't say I know him well enough to know, personality wise, how he is as a, in terms of dealing with men. I don't know the answer to that. So I'm not going to presume that I do. But I think just in terms of the X's and O's and the tactical element, you can see that he is a thinker and a really smart guy.
Yeah, and it looked as if some of those times, like when he wanted to press and Dan Campbell called it on him, he was accepting of it. You know what I'm saying? But it's one thing to be in that role and be the head guy that's giving out the out the orders too. Like, how do you deliver your message?
And he just, I think he learned what he has talent. Slay, think of it in basketball. You can't come in and say, we're gonna build our offense around the 3-point shot if you don't have good outside shooters. At some point you have to understand that, hey, I like guys that I have. They can do certain things really well, but there's other things that we can't do because we don't have those guys. Yep. So I think he's learned that. Okay. And I know the way I do my work. I feel like I'm learning something new every day, and I feel like you have to, I feel like that's a good way to be, and I think coaches have to do that as well. Obviously, at some point you feel like, hey, this is what I really want to do, and I'd like to be able to do this, but you also have to have the players to be able to execute that.
Yep. Greg Cosell with us from NFL Films, talking about defensive coordinators. Ravens defensive coordinator Mike McDonald, hot on the market, 36 years old. As you mentioned, with the Ravens since 2014, except for 2021 when he was the defensive coordinator at Michigan. So he's spent a lot of time with both Harbaugh brothers. Been the DC in Baltimore the last 2 seasons, has done a really, really good job, a hot name out there. What do you see there?
Brilliant tactician. Again, I don't know him at all. Brilliant tactician. I remember watching those Michigan teams when I did my draft work and seeing NFL pressure concepts, because you don't see a ton of NFL pressure concepts in college football. And I remember seeing that watching Michigan. And then I had a look. I didn't realize at the time, I had forgotten that he was the coordinator. And I looked up and said, oh, yeah, that's Mike McDonald. No wonder why I'm seeing NFL pressure concepts. So I think he's brilliant at what he does. So again, that's the X and O part of it, and that's always important. Believe me, I'm not suggesting that's not important, but now you're getting into being a leader of men as well as, running a defense. I'm sure if he becomes a head coach, he'll run the defense. But the other part, none of us know that, but he's really, really good tactically with what he does on the defensive side of the ball.
All right, one more offensive mind real quick. Bengals offensive coordinator Brian Callahan, son of Bill Callahan, 5 seasons as OC with the Bengals. He will reportedly interview. What do you know about him?
Yeah. Obviously, Bill Callahan, I got to know Bill years and years ago when he was in Philly. This goes back probably close to 30 years now, because he was on Ray Rhodes' staff with actually John Gruden and Sean Payton. And I remember they came to NFL Films, and I gave those guys a tour back in like 1997. Oh my God. So that was a long time ago.
Tour guy.
But anyway, so I don't know a ton about Brian. I don't know if it's his offense. It's probably more Zach Taylor's offense. So I don't know that much about him. So now it gets down to, the same kind of thing like with a Bobby Slowick. Slowick came from San Francisco and has done an awesome job, in Houston this year. Obviously, with the Bengals, I don't think they have a great O-line. I still don't think they have a great O-line. They lost, obviously Burrow late in the season. Burrow is a phenomenal quarterback, and he compensates and camouflages a lot of weaknesses in O-line play. So I don't know much about Brian Callahan, but he's been with good people. So now you get into, when you interview him, what's his plan? Who are his assistant coaches? That's one thing owners always want to know. And the people doing the interview always want to know not only your overall philosophy and plan, but who do you plan on bringing in as assistant coaches? Yep. Because it's the assistant coaches that really coach. And that becomes really critical when you hire a new staff.
Right. I always try to figure out the tentacles, right? Like, so who does Rand have history with? Like with Slowick, for example.
Right.
He was in San Francisco. Before that, I think Rand, wasn't he with the Rams when Fish was there?
Yes. Yep.
And Falcons for a long time.
Yeah. So I'm sure Coach Mack knows him well.
Who don't Mac know?
I was going to say.
That's true too. Yeah, yeah.
Well,
He's the,
hey, I
the
really
mayor of every city he's been in.
right. He just says I'm out here doing Coach Mac things. That's what he
Right,
says.
exactly. Well, that's true. That's true. Yep.
Hey, really appreciate the conversation today. I think this was a beneficial direction for us to go with you today, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting going forward now because obviously, we'll see what names continue to pop up, and obviously we're a long ways from free agency and the draft, but we'll figure it out. We'll BS them for a while here. We'll get it done.
Cosell, this is going to be a fun draft and free agency for the Titans fans. We're excited.
Without question, it's going to be a lot of fun, and hopefully I'll be down again. I think that might happen. So we'll see.
All right,
I love it. So
I'd be looking forward to that.
When are you diving in on draft picks on tape?
Believe it or not, I'm going to start watching my first stuff tomorrow. I get in super early. It's just who I am, and I'm done this week. We shoot matchup tomorrow, but I'm ready to go on that. And tomorrow morning when I get in at 5:30, which is normally when I'm sitting at my desk, I'm going to start watching a college guy tomorrow morning. So
I love it.
Can't wait.
All right, so next week, Titans pick 7.
Yeah, it'll be like, obviously next week I got to do NFL stuff, but now that there's less tape to watch because there's fewer games, later in the week I can start getting to college guys.
All right, Cosell, great stuff, man. Appreciate you.
All right, guys, appreciate it. Thanks.
There he is, Greg Cosell with NFL Films. Yeah, that NFL matchup show is a must. Saturdays at 7:30 in the morning is when I watch it. I think Babsy hits it at that point as